Psycho 4, otherwise known as The Beginning. Aptly named since this film not only doubles as a prequel, but also as the closing chapter to this overall saga, and a new beginning of sorts for Norman Bates. I think my favorite part of this experience is just how everything flows. The way that they use Norman calling into the radio show and his interactions with the host as our segue into each of the prequel sequences that we get, and then the way that they kind of all come together to later build up to the climax of the film. In terms of the prequel itself, I thought that it was 100% fine, perfectly serviceable as what is really our first crack at something like this in the early 90s, or from the 90s. I thought the actor who plays young Norman was believable enough. Mother Bates, believable enough. Narratively, we have abandoned the multiple mother story and in favor of something that fits a lot more in line with the original film, which is probably for the best. It leans quite heavily on the incestual side of the story. I would say borderline Oedipician. If that is the correct term for Oedipus-like, I really don't know. But you really get a clear sense or understanding of the psychological abuse as it pertains to sexuality. I think this film's only true crime is just that years have passed. Time has gone by and we have different adaptations, different creative attempts at this very thing. And when you compare it directly to something like Bates Motel, for example, I just happen to like that one more. That is the prequel concept that I find myself gravitating to, and that's just the reality of it. As you may have been able to tell, I have remained quite high on this series in general, especially as a young kid who really had no idea what I was getting into, no idea what to expect, no idea how the sequels would even work. But I can tell you that I really kind of view Psycho 2, 3, and 4 as this big what-if scenario. It's fun to think about things, fun to try things out, play with different things, and just ask what if sometimes. Psycho 2, for example, asks what if Norman did get out of prison 20-some years later and was left to face the surviving family of one of his victims. Psycho 3 is what if something like genuine love or romantic feelings for an outside female drove a wedge between he and his mother. With this film, it basically asks, how does this story end? What is the conclusion for this character, and what does it all look like? Not necessarily a what-if scenario, but you get the idea. And the way that this film does it is that it basically looks at it all as a conclusion for a redemption arc, which I know isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea, considering 9 out of 10 times that they attempt to make an antagonist likable or sympathetic, it ends in disaster. But I personally feel like Norman Bates is, excuse me, probably one of the only times that you can truly get away with that. I think he is the exception to that rule, and the way that they go about it is, quite successful. And when you really think about it, the kind of theme to these movies, collectively, is Norman the villain? How much do we blame him for what he does? Who is the real monster here? He or his mother? Is he any less of a victim than the people who have been murdered when it comes down to it? Can he be rehabilitated? Can he attain the pieces of a normal life that, because of his upbringing, he didn't really get to experience? And a normal life that, any living, breathing human being is going to want. And, throughout the course of this journey, he gets so close to it multiple times, only to have Mother crop back up for one reason or another to drag him back into the shit, so to speak. And so I found myself kind of organically just rooting for the guy to get his win eventually. And so it was nice to finally see him get that. And it was nice to kind of have everything get the happy ending that it does, not only for the character of Norman Bates, but also for Anthony Perkins, who would tragically pass away shortly after this film. And it was just very nice and a very fulfilling way to end it all. So that is going to bring the reviews for the original franchise to an end. But we have one final stop for our Psycho train. If you know, you know, and if you don't, you're about to find out. So sit back, and I will return with that as quick as I can. But until then, be good to one another, and we'll see you soon.